Now let us take the next concept, that is the food web. So next we are going to discuss about the food web. Now as we compare food web with that of our food chain, the food chain represents only one part of the food or energy flow through an ecosystem. Why? Because the food chain is linear. It looks like a straight line. So the food chain, they represent only one part of the food or energy flow through an ecosystem. And ecosystem consists of several interrelated food chains, which is called the food web. Now this is one food chain. So there can be many such food chains which represent a food web. I'll give you an example to make it more clear for you. Now food web is nothing but they are interconnected food chains which makes a food web. So food chains which are interconnected to each other, and this type of food chain is called a food web. And food web illustrates all possible transfers of energy and nutrients among the organism in an ecosystem. So it illustrates or it explains all the possible transfers of energy and nutrients among the organisms in an ecosystem. So this is a food web. Now this is an example of a food web. Now for example, the producer eaten by one primary organism or primary consumer, then secondary. If it goes in a linear way or in a straight line, this is a food chain. Now this is an example of a food web. See how one organism is connected with many other organisms. See how the primary producer, see here we will see that there is a complexity of relationship. So complexity of relationship in the sense that it is a culmination of many food chains. It is a culmination of many interrelated food chains. So that is the basic difference. So if you look into this example more clearly, you will get the idea. You can pause the video for a second and then you can go through this. Then you will get the understanding regarding what is a food web. Now, next one, here we are going to discuss about the type of biotic interactions in a food web. This is again very important. In the UPSC preliminary examination, many times questions have been asked from this particular portion. So types of biotic interactions in a food web. So let us see what are the different types of biotic interactions that happen within a food web. First one is parasitism. So parasitism means one would be a parasite. Parasite means an organism which feeds upon the other or one organism killing the other. So parasitism means an interaction between two species which results in the damage and harm of one member and benefit to other. That is why one positive and one negative. So parasitism means when two organisms interact with each other, one organism is benefited, the other one is actually harmed. So that is called a parasitic relationship. Now an example is in case of a tick-host relationship, tick gains benefit by sucking blood while the host is harmed as it loses blood. Now a very good example is mosquito and human beings. So if for example a mosquito bites you, the mosquito is benefited, the mosquito is a parasite in the sense that the mosquito will get blood from your body, whereas the human beings, they lose their blood, so they are negatively impacted. So this is called a parasitic relationship. Now mutualism. Mutualism means both the species which are involved in a relationship, biotic interaction or a relationship is benefited. So here both the partners benefit from one another. Example is rhizobium in the root nodules of leguminous plants. And another one is lichens, a mutual relationship between the algae and fungus. These two are the good examples. So first one, rhizobium which are found in the root nodules. So they are beneficial, mutually beneficial to each other. Then lichens are a very good example of mutual relationship between algae and fungus. And this was a question that was asked in 2014 UPSC Civil Services preliminary examination. So such relations are very important. Next we have commensalism, which means one species is benefited whereas the other species is not affected at all. So one species benefits without affecting the other species. Example, barnacles growing on the back of the whale Another very good example is orchid growing as a epiphyte on some mango branch. So one organism is not at all affected, whereas one is highly positively benefited. Next one is saprophytism, where one organism is again positively affected, another one is not affected. Organisms which live on dead and decaying organic matter, like the vultures, fungi, bacteria, protozoa, etc. Next we have predation. So here like the what we have discussed in case of parasitism, predation also one species is positively affected, whereas one species is negatively affected. Now how it is different from that of parasitism is that in predation one organism that is negatively affected, it dies. So that is the difference, okay, predation and parasitism. Here one species benefited while the other is harmed. The relation between a lion and a deer. So lion eats the deer, that means the deer will die. So in case of parasitism, even though one organism is negatively affected, it may not necessarily lead into the death of the organism. Okay, that is the difference. Next is competition. So in competition, both the organisms are negatively affected. So both the species compete with each other for the resources. Maybe they compete for resources like food, shelter, mating, etc. And both the species get harmed in the competition. So in competition or this kind of interaction, both the species get affected. So both are negatively affected. And this occur between two different species like the trees, shrubs, herbs competing with each other for water and light. Next is amensalism, where one is not affected, another one is negatively affected. So here one species is harmed while the other is neither harmed nor benefited and remains unaffected. So organisms excretes the chemicals as a part of normal metabolism of its own, but which may severely impact the other nearby species. So these are some examples. Fungi, penicillium, produce penicillin, an antibiotic substance which inhibits the growth of a variety of bacteria. A large tree inhibits the growth of small plants laying nearby due to its shades. This is a very good example. If there is a very big tree, what happens? There is a small plant growing below the tree. What happens is that the tree, because the tree's canopy is very large, sunlight may not penetrate to reach the grass which is growing or the small plants which are growing under the tree. Here see the tree is not at all affected, so no change in tree, 0, whereas the plants are negatively affected. So this is a relationship, amensalism relationship. So this is all about the biotic interactions between different organisms. So we have discussed so far from this module we have discussed about food chain. We have discussed about what is the concept of food web. In food chain, we discussed about grazing food chain, and we also discussed about the detritus food chain. We discussed about food web, and we also discussed about various types of biotic interactions within a food web. I hope this much is clear for you. We will be continuing this and once these concepts are clear, the remaining portions will be very easy for you to complete.